Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Remote No Pressure podcast. This week, we have police officer, fly fishing extraordinaire, author, and all around good guy, Jon Osborn, with us, talking to us on the Remote No Pressure podcast. Did you guys like that? We have a police officer, so I had to like refer to Police Academy. Remember Police Academy, the show from the movie from the 80s? There was a cartoon. I think that was breakfast cereal and all that. I had to do something really cool with that. So that's what that's all about, and that's what that's all about. Now, I would have used the original score from Police Academy, but it's copyrighted and I'd have to pay out the wazoo to do that. But we got the next best thing. Now, this week we have Jon Osborn, and the reason Police Academy is so important, number one, it's one of the greatest movies of the 80s, the greatest series until they got rid of Steve Guttenberg, and then it was no longer the same. But anyways, I digress on that. But Police Academy is important because that is where Jon Osborn discovered fly fishing. And you're going to hear all about it here in this episode. He's also an author, a great author. His books are on our website at remotenopressure.com. If you go to our book section, you'll see his Michigan Flies book. It's a great episode. I'm so excited. Welcome to the podcast. Let's light the fire. Well, today on the Remote No Pressure podcast, we have Jon Osborn with us. Thank you very much for joining us, Jon.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate it.
Well, one of the reasons I reached out to you, number one, is big shout out to Kaz for giving me your name, and then you authored a book actually called Classic Michigan Flies: 16 Legendary Patterns, and you're obviously a Michiganian or a Michigander, depending on who you talk to. But can you tell us what prompted you to write this book?
That's a good question. It was like a lot of things. A series of events came together that prompted the thought to write this book. One of them was just a lot of time spent on the Au River, especially the North Branch, and just all the history that's there. It's so rich in fly tying history, from the flies to the longboats to the people that frequented that area around the lumbering era. And a buddy of mine, Joe, who illustrated the book, we were sitting around and having a few beers, and he's an artist, and we just talked about the idea of writing a book that would help to preserve some of the history of those flies that brought us to where we are today. And that spawned the idea, and so we wrote a few chapters, if I recall, and sent them off to a couple publishers, thinking, hey, as Joe called it, lobbing a grenade over the fence. And sure enough, Stackpole bid on it, and I still remember exactly where I was when they called. I mean, it was like I couldn't believe it. And so that's how that was born. And being a family guy and working a job on the side of that as well, it didn't come together so quickly because there was a lot of interviewing and digging that had to be done. But over the course of the next couple of years, we wrote that book, and Joe illustrated it, and that's how we have the final product that we have today.
Well, that's great, Jon. And we talk a lot here on the podcast about dealing with stress of our jobs or our careers through fly fishing. And according to your bio, and we've talked as well, you have 2 decades as a beat cop under your belt. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yep.
And how were you always fly fishing, or was it a result of the stressful job that you had, or how did you end up fly fishing? Is it because of the job, or I can only imagine how
Yeah,
stressful your
that's an
job is.
interesting story. It it was it really came full circle because I was introduced to fly fishing by a guy that I went to the police academy with, and he I wrote about that in the book that I'm currently working on, and he he started talking about the rivers that he was visiting, a lot of them in the UP, the Fox and the Two Hearted, and some of the ones up there also steeped in history, and just really romanticized the whole idea. And you know how it goes when somebody's passionate about something, it kind of rubs off, and you're like, wow, I'd like to try this too. So he taught me um, casting in the parking lot after the police academy. So we're surrounded by all these police cars that we had just driven, and we worked on that, and then we finally started hitting some rivers after I could, just get a little bit of line out, not straight by any means, but just a big puddle of line out in front of me. At least I got that, and we went out and we hit some rivers, and the Muskegon was fairly close, and then we went to the Pure Marquette, and yeah, I was hooked. Not no pun intended there, but I was hooked, and then it really served to benefit me later in my career in law enforcement, just to balance what would eventually become a pretty high energy, high stress job.
I can only imagine how stressful it is being a beat cop, and looking at the pictures that you sent over to me, and we'll put those up on our Instagram page and our blog and all of that, as well as links to your book. But I mean, you look like a modern day Hemingway. So, one of the things that you had mentioned was, you smoke a charred corncob pipe. You
Right.
prefer wax cotton and wool over nylon, bamboo over graphite. I mean, it seems like you really like to get to the root and to the heart of fly fishing. Am I right?
Yeah, I think everybody approaches fly fishing from a different angle. Some people need the latest and greatest, $800 waders, or carbon fiber, this or that, and that's fine. I don't hold anything against anyone who wants to do that, but for me, it's just kind of a way to, I don't know, revisit the past and kind of settle down, and that's just my approach to things. And I know that I get some flack from my friends over it sometimes, and especially from my coworkers, and doesn't really matter to me. So, it's I really enjoy the history of it. I really enjoy the roots of where fly fishing began, especially in Michigan, which is so rich in fly fishing history. And yeah, I guess it's my best attempt at a time machine, maybe.
Yeah, I think it seems like you don't appreciate the older things or your history until you get older, and then you realize, wait, there were whole generations before me that did this, or and with me, it's the same way. I smoke meat a lot, and I like to use real fire, and I'm really weird about how I make it, because I want it to be the real way. and
Sure.
the fly fishing, I'm not that intense about, but I can totally appreciate what you're talking about. Now, it says here that you contribute a lot to some magazines, to Sporting Classics, Michigan Blue, Pointing Dog Journal, Upland Almanac, and many others. How did you how did you start writing? How did you get into that? I mean, you were a beat cop.
Yeah. You know, the mundane part of police work is definitely the writing, because it's very dry and very fact driven, and just the facts, ma'am. But I think it was an outlet for more of a creative style of writing for me. And I've been extremely blessed by people around me. Whether it was getting started in fly fishing or bird hunting, or I could rattle off a list of 20 things like that I was just really affected by people who were passionate about what they were doing and took the time to invest in me. But as far as the writing goes, I had a few very notable editors that were just maybe saw something that they liked in my writing and invested a lot more time than I would have expected into me. Um, and so I think it starts with throwing some of these things out there. Trying to submit some pieces, and they're admittedly bad at first, but every now and then you hit it right. And I submitted some stuff to Michigan Blue magazine. I had an editor there by the name of Lisa, who she really took a lot of time to just say, hey, this is good, but she didn't hold anything back either, and she didn't say it was all good. She said, hey, we can work on this, but I really like the way that you said this. And Tom Carney was another one from Upland Almanac that just really spent a lot of time. Steve Smith from Pointing Dog Journal. All those people I owe a big debt of gratitude to for taking that extra time. And I don't know if I would have pursued it had it not been for those people. You talk about paying honor to those people, and as far as fly fishing goes, you mentioned Kaz, and he's another one, who really, the guy is extremely generous and genuine, and has really helped me out a lot as far as the book that I'm currently working on, because he's just a wealth of knowledge. And being surrounded by people like that is humbling. It's not only does it make you realize that there's a lot of good people in the world too, but it also makes you want to be one of those people. And so when somebody approaches you that may need some help with something, or maybe they're thinking about pursuing something like writing or like fishing, um, taking that extra time out after you've been shown that same I don't know what's the word I'm looking for here, um, that same attention, I guess.
Yeah, it's those people you want to be more like them.
Really, that's the case. Yeah.
Yeah. We had Dave McCoy. He's out of the Northwest. So Dave McCoy was on our podcast, and people can go back and listen to this. But he talked a lot about the first person, the responsibility of the first person that introduces you to fly fishing, or like, say for instance, whoever introduced you to writing. It's very important, because then you kind of see your whole fly fishing career or your writing career, I mean, through the eyes of that first person
Hmm.
who introduced you.
Yeah, I do 100% agree with that, and I think everybody has such a different approach to. We'll talk about writing and fly fishing. I think that the two go hand in hand, but I think every individual person has a very unique and distinctive approach to either of those pursuits. And so I think that it's important, if you're able, to have more than just one person. And like I said, I was blessed to have a number of people, and several who were and continue to be very close to me. Um, but I think seeing, let's say, writing through one person's eyes, and then switching gears and seeing it through another person's eyes, and being able to combine those two or those three viewpoints can be very valuable, and I think it's important. And I think it really works for life in general when you don't just take one person's perspective and say, okay, that's the way it's got to be. I think that multi-dimensional viewpoint is very important.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Um, when you go fishing, John, um, what is it that you're chasing? I mean, obviously we want to catch fish, but what is it that you try to get out of fishing when you step into the water?
Yeah, that's a good question because there again, I think it's every angler hits the river for a different reason, and I think that no one fisherman's reason is wrong. But for myself, I am in pursuit of an experience above all things, and sometimes that means catching fish, and sometimes that means a big skunko, and sometimes that means just catching a few fish. You've got the trophy hunters out there who are going for the 20 plus or even high 20s trout, and you got the numbers guy who's going for how many can I catch in a day, and they're taking it off on a counter, or at least mentally doing that. For me, it's uh, a great reason to be outside. It's a great reason to be with friends, to decompress, and just to realize that everything factors into this experience that we call fly fishing, and not just fish, not size, not numbers, but the entire experience. I mean, having a nice bowl of tobacco out of a corncob pipe on the bank, that's huge to me,
Hmm.
sharing a beer on the bank with friends, watching someone next to me catch the fish of their dreams. It's as good, if not better, than doing it myself. We fish small streams a lot, and I have a really close group of friends who will go two at a time down a small stream, and there's not enough room to fish two at a time. But the whole point being that one person's fishing and the other person's either spotting fish for them or just kind of hanging back a little bit and watching them fish. And it's like going to a movie. It's not like, hey, let me get up there so I can catch that fish. It's like, let me try to help you the best way that I know how, and we can both share the joy in it.
Yeah, totally. I almost, when you, especially when you take someone fishing, you want them, for me, and I'm sure you're the same way, you want them to outfish you. You want them to really, especially if you take them to your spot, you want them to catch some good
Oh
fish,
yeah,
you know?
yeah, nothing worse than telling somebody, holy smokes, I had fish all over the place, and you should have seen the ones that I was catching yesterday, and you come there and there's not a thing happening. I mean, that's you know then you gotta fall back on the pipe on the bank thing, and that's okay too. But you would like to see them. Wow, those brook trout are the most vibrant fish that I've ever seen. I mean, never seen spots like that. I've caught brook trout around Michigan, but this spot is just the finest.
Uh-huh. Right. Well, tell us about your most memorable fishing adventure. I mean, you've been to the Keys, you fished the flats, you fished up in the Driftless region of Wisconsin, Colorado. I mean, you've done a lot of fishing all over, but can you tell us that one story that just really sticks out to you when you're thinking about your fishing trips?
Wow, that is a loaded question because it's almost like saying the number one person who's had the biggest effect on your life. I mean, it's like, wow, try to narrow that down. Um, boy, there's so many. I mean, my wife consistently outfishes me in the Keys. She has boated two tarpon over 100 pounds
Wow.
where I've caught nothing, and that was awesome to see. Um, man, I would say one of the biggest times for me was when my daughter was born. My daughter Autumn was born 2005, and we immediately ran out and got one of those Kelty backpack carriers. I think I sent you the picture on this one. I took her to one of my favorite creeks of all time, and this was even before she could go in the backpack. This was when she was in the front pack, and she was dangling, in front of me. And if you look at that picture, you can see her pacifier dragging in the water on a piece of paracord that I tied on there because I knew she'd drop it, and I knew it would just flow downstream. So we tethered that in, but I just wanted to catch, a brook trout with her sitting in there and get a picture with her with a brook trout. And sure enough, it happened. Beautiful fish, beautiful daughter. She's 12 now. I mean, that was a long time ago. Um, but one of the most memorable experiences. And I had another one like that with my son where we went steelhead fishing. Same deal, but went over on the Rogue. He's in a backpack, so he's a couple months bigger. And, just nymphing for steelhead in early April. And sure enough, got one on. Sure enough, landed it and got kind of a fun picture of him leaning over the side of that backpack trying to touch that steelhead. So it doesn't always work out that way, you know? I mean, sometimes you fall in the stream and you both get wet and you leave crying. So, or at least they're crying and you're wishing you were crying.
Right.
But I again, I talk a lot about blessings, and I have just been blessed beyond belief when I look at it and think of all these experiences that I've had. Those are just a small slice of the entire pie experience, and I hope to have many more, but fly fishing has brought a richness to my life that I've never anticipated decades ago.
Yeah. Have you ever introduced anyone to fly fishing and have seen their life changed because of it?
Yeah, that's a good question. Let's see. A lot of these guys that I fish with, we kind of either learned together or they knew what they were doing before they knew me. I am working with a young man by the name of River right now. His parents said that he really was interested in learning how to tie flies, asked if I'd be interested in teaching him. And that's been a really good thing in the last 3 years. He's just like taken off. I mean, this kid is going to be like either a guide or some type of industry professional, within the fly fishing community, because he is just like smitten by the whole thing. I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, he ties flies. He's got like tackle boxes full of flies that he's tied. And so, do I take credit for that? No, I don't take credit for it, but it's been really fun to be around while that progressed and that seed grew, because, he had never tied a fly when we started. So,
Yeah. Now, do your kids? Now, you said your daughter's 12 now. Are they fly fishing at all? Did they take it up, or?
That's I part of me says I wish they did. My daughter does know how to cast, and she has caught plenty of bluegill on a fly rod. She isn't in love with it, and my son really isn't either. And I try not to push him in that, even though it would be great if they were, but they're their own people, and I'm okay with that too. I mean, I guess if we're going to go back to the experience thing again, you can have wonderful experiences with your children and not have them be doing exactly what you find enjoyment in. So, for example, my son just started playing football, and he's really good at it, and he really loves it. It was never a part of my growing up because I was either hunting or fishing. But I've been able to experience some of his joy as he's learned how to play and has had some really good success with it. And that's great too. So I'm fine with that. Selfishly, would I like them to be interested in fly fishing? Sure, it'd be great, but it's not going to change anything about my relationship with them.
Well, that takes some maturity, and so sounds like you're doing the right thing, John. That's
every
awesome.
day's another step, right? I mean, all you can do is keep trying to do the right thing, and sometimes you fall square on your face. But
yeah. We're raising kids. It's like you look back, like, okay, I did that good. Oh, I really screwed that up, and you just hope.
Yeah.
You just hope they
Gosh,
end up okay at the end,
Oh, for sure.
Now, switching gears a little bit, you're writing a new book right now called "The Flyfisher's Guide to Michigan." Can you tell us a little bit about what lit the fire, what started that process, and just when that's going to be ready and what the book is about? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'd love to. Um, so the book, I'm working with a publisher called Wilderness Adventures Press out of Montana, and the book is going to feature roughly 70 major rivers in Michigan, upper and lower Michigan. And, um, you know, Michigan has so much fishable water if you want to include creeks and lakes and where do you draw the line between streams and rivers? Who knows? But one thing I was adamant about with this was just not including creeks because being kind of a dyed-in-the-wool small stream fisherman, I didn't think that they could take the pressure that a book of this type would potentially draw. So the publisher and I talked about that, and they were okay with that. But each book, each chapter of the book features a different river, and I had I guess, the liberty to decide how those chapters would look. And so there's an introduction that describes the river, the length and does it have dams on it and things like that. But there's a heading under that that's called Then and Now that talks about history, and being kind of a history nerd, I really enjoy that kind of thing. But I think it does set it apart from other books of its type. A lot of times you see either a history book or a guidebook, but not both of them together. And then it just jumps right into the fishing, whether it's a smallmouth fishery or a trout fishery or a pike fishery or whatever it is, maybe a combination of the three. And then is it better to float it or is it better to wade it? And maybe it's both. Maybe you wade the upper section and float the lower section. And so really what it's aimed at is either somebody who's starting out in fly fishing and doesn't know a certain river, or somebody who lives in the state and they mostly fish the west side and they're going to go to something east side or maybe to the upper peninsula and they're curious about a certain river and they want to know what they're getting into, what kind of fish they can catch there and how they should fish it. Or you have somebody from out of state who's never been to Michigan or rarely been to Michigan. They could look at this book and say, okay, I have a basic idea of what I'm getting into and basic idea of what type rod I want to bring and what flies I'd like to bring for this time of year. You could write an entire book on one river, so it's not going to be super specific about things. But at the same time, I think it should give a pretty good um, guide, for lack of a better word, to those rivers. And I've made some great friends through the process. I've worked with a lot of guides and biologists, people who know a lot more than I do about a specific fishery. Because let's face it, we might know one or two or three rivers intimately, but we're never going to compete with a guide who spends 3/4 of the year working on a certain river system. I mean, there's just no way,
Right.
because we have full-time jobs and families and things like that. Fishing is a pastime for us, and it's a career for them. Same for biologists. I mean, this is whether they fly fish or not. These are the guys and gals who are walking this river and electroshocking it and planting it and managing the habitat. So who's going to know our river system better than those individuals? And
Hmm.
so I, you know, I've been really humbled again by the generosity of some of these people who said, "Yeah, I'll take time out of my day and talk to you about the Rifle River or the Akiak or any one of these rivers that especially the two that I just talked about. I haven't fished those rivers. I've fished a lot of rivers in Michigan, but I haven't fished those rivers. So I need somebody's experience and knowledge to get a good feel for that. And I hope this spring to go and fish them. But there again, one trip to a river like that makes me no expert on that river.
Right. Right. Well, if someone wanted to buy your book, or if someone wanted to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to do that, John?
It's on Amazon. It's in Barnes and Noble. Pretty much all the Barnes and Nobles that I've been in has at least had several copies. I don't know if they still do. I mean, that was published in 2013, but I know the one in my hometown still has them. Local bookstores have them. Another place that you could get that, maybe a Libris, kind of an Amazon type bookstore, and then, probably eBay probably has some too. It retails for $19.95. That's brand new. There may be used copies out there by now. It's a coffee table style book. As Joe, the illustrator, and I said, it's a book for people who appreciate fishing and fine art. He gave me prints of all the flies that we had featured in the book, and it really is fine art. I mean, it's great stuff, and he does a great job with really anything he puts a paintbrush to canvas with. But this is especially good work of his.
Well, great. Well, we'll put up all the links on our website, and we'll make sure people will be able to to find that. And when your new book comes out, be sure to let us know, because we'd love to put that out there as well. And thank you very much for spending some time with us tonight, John.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate the podcast.
Well, thank you, John, and thank you for listening to the Remote No Pressure podcast. Be sure to check out our website at remotenopressure.com and sign up for our mailing list. And also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, as most of you already are. And if you are listening to us on iTunes or Google Play or any other platform, leave a review. It helps out. Until next time, go fishing.